G'day. This week I thought we'd do an entry level video, and we're going to have a look at the differences between having a commercial property investment and a residential property investment. Now I'm going to do it a little bit on the pricing, but you'll find plenty of material on that, and it's depending on what area you're in, all the pricing will be very much different. But I'm going to have a look at some other key criteria that you need to look at, and at the end of the video we'll do a couple of wrap-ups and some general concepts that you can use in any application. G'day, I'm Peter Bender from Bundaberg Commercial, and you think being Bundaberg Commercial I'm going to lean towards commercial property, but I'm not actually here to encourage either option. What I'm here to do is to give you things to think about so you can make your own decision. I'm not here into motivating you. The last thing I want is for you to ring me up in 5 years' time saying, oh, I went down commercial or I went down residential because you said so. Not into that. I want you to make your own decision because you've got to be accountable for whatever you come with. Whether those accountabilities are wealth and everything that your dreams can think of, or whether it's absolute misery and you're just throwing all your money away. That's your choice. I'm just here to give you some things to think about. So you still with me? Now here's something that I prepared earlier for you. And at great expense too. Hope you notice the fact that I've gone with different colours this time. Usually we use white, but I thought, what the heck, we'll try something different. So these are the things that we're going to have a look at in regards to deciding which option is better. And look, commercial and residential, it's probably not one better than the other. They're just different. Different boats for different people is the easiest way to explain it. Now, we're going to talk entry-level properties here. So for an entry-level property, and I'm just going to look at Bundaberg. So you recognise that an entry-level property in Brisbane is going to be a different price. An entry-level property in Albury is going to be a different price. An entry-level property in Fremantle is going to be a different price. So it depends on where it is that you're looking at doing. But the aspects that I'm looking at is by having everything in one particular region, everything's relative to each other. So as long as you don't compare a house in Parramatta with a house down at Glenelg, you should be pretty well okay. So the first thing is, what is an entry-level price? So an entry-level price for residential, you look at about 500k. An entry-level price for commercial, entry-level price for residential is $500,000. Entry-level price up here for commercial is $600,000. Now, a $500,000 property in Bundaberg is not going to get you 4 bedrooms, brick and tile, 3 bathrooms, gold-plated, and fantastic kitchen. It's going to get you pretty close to something that's 40, 50 years old, needs work, it's got 3 bedrooms, probably got a meth lab neighbour next door, that sort of type criteria. So don't be dreaming thinking that 500 grand is going to get you a lot of money. Similarly, $600,000 in a commercial property is not going to get you a lot of money either. It's going to probably get you something in the flood zone, something that's, once again, 40, 50 years old. But these are the entry-level things that you look at. So if you are one who needs to have bright, shiny stuff, then you can probably double those prices. If you're someone who's happy to work the small end of town, take some risks, build your asset growth, okay, well then, 500 to 600,000 is what you're going to be looking at. So the first thing that you can recognize is a lot of people think that commercial property is very expensive. Yeah, it depends what you compare it to a loaf of bread. Yes, it is. But there's not a lot of difference in Bundaberg for entry-level price between commercial and residential. So one of the factors that you look at, if you want to know what you can get to get into the market, there's not much difference to make your decision on based on price. Okay, but what about rent? What rent do you get in those two categories? Where's my notes? Okay, let's have a look at rents. Now, there's a lot of difference in what you would get in the rent. For a residential property, right now you're getting about the $560, $580 a week for a property that's worth $500,000. So that's pretty cool. Now, what you need to recognise is that's actually called a gross rent. In the commercial property, you're looking at about $865 a week, and that's actually called a net rent. So apart from the fact that the numbers are a lot healthier in commercial, which is one of the reasons why people go towards commercial, the profitability is higher, is the fact that in residential, you have to, as a landlord, as the owner, you have to pay pretty well for everything. They will ring you up. You need to get a washer changed. Okay, you need to take care of it. Something's not working. You got to go fix it. These are all the aspects. The rent, the insurance comes in. You got to pay for it. The rates come in. You've got to pay for it. The property management fees come in. You've got to pay for it. It's almost totally opposite in regards to commercial. In commercial property, look, probably 70% of properties up here, you will find that the tenant pays the insurance. The tenant pays the rates. Tenant pays all the council fees, the water rates and charges and the likes of that. And the tenant may well pay your property management fees. I've even seen them in the stage where the tenant will pay the accountancy fees that you incur to do your books for the business. So whilst the numbers of 580 to 865 sounds dramatic, it's dramatically more dramatic, if that makes sense, because net 865 for commercial property is what you get in your pocket. The 570 odd that you get per week for a residential property, that's the gross rate. What does the net amount come out at? Look, probably take 15% off that. So, instead of $560, you're really getting about $400 a week. So it's almost twice as much rent that you get on commercial. So whilst we have titled this video More Than Just Money, money is one of the big criterias. And there is a lot more money that can be made, and I use the word can be made, or use the three words can be made, in regards to commercial side. So we've spoken about net and gross. All right, outgoings. So we just touched on that. So essentially, across is the fact that the tenant does not pay outgoings in a residential property, but a tenant does pay outgoings on a commercial property. And like I said, that's generally the case. Some of the older properties with tenants who've been there for a long time, and they've got a month-by-month sort of lease because the landlord's quite happy, not upsetting the apple cart. You'll find those sort of landlords will pay some of the outgoings, if not all the outgoings. So it depends, once again, on horses for courses, but generally is what we look at. Okay, what about using a property manager and having to do inspections? Okay. In regards to a residential property, lots of stuff can happen in a short time. I've had residential properties and I've had tenants who suddenly don't mow the lawn, and it's in the middle of summer, and we had acreage, so suddenly the whole septic system was starting to malfunction because it wasn't getting the airing to dry it out. The pool had gone black because the tenants hadn't taken care of it. The rent hadn't been paid, and each week it hasn't been paid. And you've got the neighbours complaining because they're having parties and there's bottles around the side and there's rats running through the garbage bins. Lots of things can happen in a residential property. So it is quite normal for most people, particularly first-time investors, to have a property manager. Okay, what about on the commercial side? On the commercial side, nothing much really happens very fast. I mean, I've had one tenant that took the glass out of the front of their premises and put in a roller door. But outside of that, that's probably the only time I've had a situation where a tenant has made some changes. Usually just over decades, there's a huge mess that gets bigger and bigger because they've got machinery and paint tins and tools and everything that goes around. And you're not going to change that in a business. You can go into a residential property and you can, dictate how often they should clean the shower and what they should use it with, and the fact that there's hair in the sink in the bathroom, and the stove has to be absolutely pristine. forget that mentality with a commercial premises. Commercial premises, in realistic terms, the tenant goes in there, you leave them alone. It's only if you need to make some changes, like maybe put solar on the roof or upgrade the property, is the only time you redo inspections. So the message there is, if you've got a property manager, you're probably not going to get a real lot of value from them. I would only really use them if you've got a high-risk tenant, someone who may be new, someone who may have a dodgy history of paying, because in those instances, especially if you're a remote investor, like you're nowhere near with a property, then you may want to get a property manager to chase up the money, make sure the money works on there. But essentially, property manager, yep, you need one of those. Property manager, no, you don't. Okay, let's now have a look at the quality of tenants. And I put in that bracket also law associated with the tenancies. In a residential situation, I don't know which state you're in, but generally every state now has a strong leaning towards a tenant. Those poor people that have got no rights in life, but they will definitely have plenty of rights in regards to the Residential Tenancy Act in Queensland. You can only put your rent up now once a year, similar to commercial. If there's anything wrong, the ledger always seems to be geared towards a tenant. So that's just a tough time. Okay, what about the average quality type of tenant that you get? It's difficult, and I know there's going to be lots of comments and saying, "Oh, Peter, you're derogatory to the normal type of people." But I've worked with a lot of tenants, and there's some great ones. But nowadays, the majority they're probably average, and there's quite a lot that are dodgy, and they will move from property to property. It's a little bit hard for them now because there's just not a lot of properties available. Like I said, things like mowing the lawn and cleaning the pool, you may well have to put that into the rent, or pay that for yourself to have that going, because the mentality of people nowadays is they don't respect your property. They've almost sitting there thinking, well, I'm the tenant and you should be grateful that I'm here. Now, it really depends on the market situation. It's probably a little bit different right now because tenants are probably very grateful to have their property. So, if you give them the nudge and the warning that, hey, it's summer, you need to mow that lawn every week, you may actually get that done. Whereas if it's a time, and videos age very quickly, if there's a time where it's easy for tenants to get another property, you'll probably find that you don't have that sort of leverage, and they may get around to mowing the lawn after the third or fourth complaint and the second or third breach that you've had to issue through them. So my gut feel is the quality of tenant in regards to taking care of your property and paying your rent is probably moderate in regards to residential tenancy. Okay, in commercial tenancy, most people who are tenants are running a business, so their whole mindset is different. Businesses don't want to have to move premises. It's very important to them to keep that premises straight, so that straight away there's motivation for them to keep the landlord relatively happy if they can. I've seen the ledger is probably almost the other way. I've seen a lot of moderate landlords, to put the phrase differently, as opposed to moderate tenants. Most of the tenants are pretty good. They'll pay if they can. Remember, it's a commercial world, so sometimes cash flow can be a little bit difficult. So you make sure you set up something like a direct debit system or run along those sort of ways. The law in commercial, it's essentially there is no heavy legislation from state government or even federal government. So laws are by contract law, so that's why a lease is so important. Breaches are a different sort of concept if they're needed at all. You generally go straight to court rather than have to go to mediators at state level. So it's a little bit different. It's a lot easier to have rights as a landlord. And I'm looking at you as an investor as being a landlord. So that's the two aspects that we've got in regards to the law and the type of tenant. Tenant, look, let's say most of them are even. In regards to commercial, it's quite favourable. Okay, and that all sounds pretty good. Hey, Peter, you're leaning towards commercial. You sure you're not sort of bending it just because you're a commercial realtor? All right, let's have a reality check. Let's have a look at saleability. And once again, it depends on the market. Now, one good thing is the residential market and the commercial market tend to be offsetting each other. When one's high, the other's low. Consequently, when the other's low, then the other one's high. They tend to have somewhat opposite cycles. There's probably some reasoning for that, but I won't go into too much detail on that one at this particular point of time. So saleability generally for residential property is you can generally sell it pretty easy, or easier than you can a commercial property. The difference in both aspects, we need to make sure we compare apples to apples. So let's say you want to sell your commercial or your residential property and you've got a tenant in both. Okay, right now it's hot property in commercial. So you could move a tenanted property that's pitched at a market rate. You could move that in a month. It's quite a good time to be able to do that. I have people regularly ringing me up looking for a rented commercial property. In regards to residential, look, it's a hot time for residential as a market because the fact that it's just a huge demand outstripping supply. In regards to tenanted properties, look, that gets a little bit different because most of the buyers nowadays are going to be owner-operators. The legislative changes are really quite depressing for landlords. So there's quite a lot of people leaving the residential market and going into other avenues, whether it's stocks, whether it's commercial property, whatever they want to work with. So there's a few people who are sort of saying, look, it's just too darn hard. The margins are too small. The return on investment's too small. Like I said, we went through, if you're getting $400 a week on a $500,000 property, I'm not real sure what that is in rates, but you're looking around about 4 or 5%. So if you're borrowing, that sort of starts to get really tight. You don't want to be tight. So saleability, if it's an empty property, a house will probably still sell quite quickly. And if it's a commercial property and it's empty, to lease it is really, really hard, and to sell it is moderately hard depending on where it is. You'll be looking at 6 months to try and sell a commercial property right now, whereas in an empty house, you could probably sell that in a month. So saleability, look, it's good for... Oh, I've got these guys around the wrong way. Okay. Saleability, no. Saleability, yes. Tenants law. For commercial, it's good. For these guys. Oh, we totally got everything backwards here. That's probably outgoings. Ah. 6. Well, there you go. That's the joy of live TV. Just imagine everything's round back to front. So make sure you're listening to what I'm doing rather than what I'm showing you to do. Okay, other things that we look at is vacancy. If you have a vacant residential property right now, you can probably fill it pretty quickly. If you have a vacant commercial property, then it's going to be hard to fill in most instances. How hard? I've got some clients who have been looking for tenants for almost 2 years. That's tough when you've got to make a mortgage payment each month. So that is one of the big differences. Vacancy, commercial, yuck. Vacancy, residential. And the last one that I've got is repairs. Now, whilst you get lots of repairs on residential, they tend to be small. Whereas in commercial, you won't get many recalls for repairs. Most tenants will actually fix their own things, except maybe for office space. If you've got a keyboard, you've got no idea how to fix a washer, so you have to bring someone in. But if it's an industrial shed, particularly if it's steel, if you're going to have to make a change, it's probably going to be expensive. So repairs for commercial, it's big dollar. residential is small dollars. All right, wrapping up, there's probably a couple of concepts that you need to be familiar with and comfortable and understand in order to come up with the correct decision as to whether you should go residential, commercial, or something else totally. So the first thing we look at is supply and demand. That's all got to do with timing. If you've got a lot of supply, like a lot of houses or a lot of commercial properties, and you've got little demand, as in there's not many buyers, well then it's a buyer's market. That's when you want to get into the investment. If you're not push for time, then wait for a buyer's market. You're going to pick up bargains and get a lot more value for your dollar. If it's the other way around, if demand is high, such as in housing right now, and supply is low, then it's going to be a seller's market. So once again, that's what you have a look at. You'll find prices will rise quickly. Now, that used to not be too much of an issue in a residential market because you're in Queensland able to punch up every 6 months the rent. So if the market price of your property went up, you could match that with the market rise in your rates. In your rent from your tenants. In Queensland now, the legislation, as I mentioned, is only once a year. Can you change it? In commercial, it's always been like that. You basically have an annual CPI increase or a fixed rate increase. So changing the rents is something to go there. And that comes on the supply and demand. We used to have a lot of instances, the rent increase was maybe 2% because inflation was really, really low. Now I'm talking with customers and they're getting rent increases of 8%. That starts to hurt when you're running a business. Likewise, we've seen the changes. I'm sure it's only about 4 years ago, you could get a property in Bundaberg, a decent property for $350. Now you can't get a decent property for less than $650. So it's almost doubled in rent in 4 or 5 years. Don't panic. After every boom comes a bust, and after every bust comes a boom. So it'll change. When I first started in real estate, we'd have people coming in, looking to get a property, and they would be offered 2 or 3 weeks free rent to get them into a residential property. You don't get that nowadays, I tell you. Now, it doesn't matter what type of investment you have. You need to be aware that with every risk, there's reward. Now, you may have a look at the figures up on that board on the wrong side, but if you've been listening, you know where I'm going from. There is more money to be made on the commercial side, but when you balance that off with the saleability and the difficulty in getting tenants, you appreciate that the reason the money is higher is because the risk is also higher. You need to make sure you're getting plenty of money when you've got a tenant, because it may be a long period before you get another tenant. On the other side, I've had properties where the tenant is left on the Monday and the Tuesday a new tenant comes in. Like I said, it's horses for courses, different times, different properties. But when you're looking at entry level, like I said, you're not looking at a great shed. It's not going to be high demand. So if it's an area where there's not a lot of people looking for commercial property, you may be stuck a long time. Risk and reward. The other way that I look at risk and reward is that is a head thing. That's a cognitive thing. You can understand risk and reward. But to me, I explain to my clients that it's more about the stomach than it is the head. So if you're a person who, like I've had, for argument's sake, I've been in programs where there's been huge risk and huge reward. I'm talking 300% return, and I'm talking situations where you can lose everything in a couple of hours. Now, it's not share trading, but that sort of type concept. Crypto is another one. I haven't gone in there. But you need to recognize that if you're someone who's going to freak out at losing $10, then that's what I mean by the stomach. To be in something that is a high risk endeavor, you need to have a cast iron stomach. If you're going to go to bed each night worrying how you're going to pay your mortgage, how you're going to pay for the food tomorrow, how you're going to pay your kids' tuition, then make sure you've got something in a low risk margin. If you're in your 30s and 40s and you feel that you can take a hit, then go on something higher. But at the end of the day, irrespective if you're a head investor or a stomach investor, whether you got cast iron or whether you got butterflies in your stomach, make sure you only invest what you can afford to lose. that will probably be the end of the story. If you can focus on only investing what you can afford to lose, then have fun, enjoy it. Like I said, I'm not recommending one option over the other, but I just wanted to make sure that you realize that picking between residential and commercial is more than just money. All right, till next week, take care and God bless.